Hello, hello, hello. As people come in, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. We've already got 66 people here. Y'all are a punctual bunch. I'm really, really excited. Katrina, thanks for starting us off. Go Austin was just there a couple months ago. We'll give people a minute to get in. I know we've got about 500 people that signed up for this, which is awesome. So first and foremost, I just want to say a very sincere thank you all for making the time to be here. I've done my best to make this super actionable, tactical. The two questions we always get is this recorded? And can we have the slides after? Yes. And yes, we don't gatekeep here, right? We're in this together. So before we get into what we're going to do with the time today, the reason that we can do this for free and not charge anybody is because the wonderful Alexine at Women in Sales has done such a phenomenal job of working with a lot of great companies who are partners. So I do want to shout them out now because this is why we can do this. We've got AirMeet, we've got Aligned, Aspireship, Comsor, Demandbase, DocuSign, Luster, Motive, Rework Training, Sendoso, The Juice, Us in Technology, QuotaPath, WorkLife, and Zillow. Shout out Alexine for just like straight up hustling and getting all these great partners. So again, thank you. We've got about 100 people here. So let's go ahead and have some fun. So I have a rule for these sessions, which is they are always more fun when you party in the chat. So I'm going to be sharing my takes on messaging in email that won't get you ghosted. I am not the only person who knows things about this topic, though. I bet there's a lot of people here who have other opinions, other things they've tried too. So please do not be shy. As we're talking through each section, if you've got an idea to share, drop it in the chat. If you have something that's worked for you, drop it in the chat. And then I've carved out plenty of time at the end. We did get some community questions from the Women in Sales Slack. I put those into the deck. We've got lots of time. So if you've got questions or scenarios you want to run through, I would be more than happy to take those answers at the end. So we'll come off slides then. All right. So you are all here, hopefully, for messaging that won't get you ghosted. You are either here for that or you are here to see Milk, my dog, which I promised. And he is in the background. I guarantee he will be making some funny faces. When we talk about messaging that will not get you ghosted, I think the thing we're all probably trying to protect against is spending our time doing anything only to get nothing in return. Our most precious resource that we have as salespeople is our time. And one of the things looking back on my career, for those of you that don't know me, I spent 18 years as a frontline seller, not a sales manager, not a sales leader, just grinding it out as a salesperson. One of the things I look back on is how often someone probably did not reply. Someone kind of ghosted me, left me in the dust because of something I said. And so now at this point in my career, I think really, really hard about how I say and what I say all throughout the sales process to minimize the chances of that happening. So first things first, we're going to party in the chat. I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine that you have just walked into a shopping mall and maybe you've got like a fire birthday party to go to this weekend. And you're like, I need an outfit that makes me feel really, really good. So you're walking through the mall, you're on your way to wherever you shop, and then all of a sudden, this building suspense, this happens. You make eye contact with that person, that lovely person that's working at the mall kiosk. What do you do in that moment? Drop it in the chat. Look away. We got run in all capital letters. Look the other way. Say, hi, I'm not interested. Smile and keep walking. We got a lot of fast walkers here. So I am also in that camp. When that happens, I am like, let me just dodge and weave. And I will go into any store. I don't even care what the store is. Get me out of this situation because I don't want to be sold. There's some people, like my husband, who will literally sit there and talk to these people for 45 minutes. I would say he's probably a bit of a unique flower in that sense. The third option that I hear a lot is I feel bad for this person. I don't want to be rude because I'm in sales. So when they look at me and I lock eyes, I wait for them to start saying something. And then I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. No, I'm not interested. I'm good. I don't even know what it is. I just know I'm not interested because I know that I don't want to be sold. I don't want to be in a weird, icky conversation where I'm feeling pressured to buy something or do something that I don't want to do. Now, if we pause and acknowledge most of us, maybe some of us are not like that, some of y'all might be like my husband, but most of us are like that. And then we reflect on how most of us were taught to communicate over email and sales, we see a really big divide there, which is in many cases, what we're trying to do in email communication is convince someone. I want you to take a meeting. I want you to send back a proposal. I want you to get a group together to evaluate. Whatever the thing is, we often are in a mode of convincing. And that comes through in our tonality, it comes through in our messaging. And as a result, we create these little mall kiosk moments for our prospects and our customers because we're applying way too much pressure. And it just feels like something that people really kind of want to step back from. So, what I've done for today is I've identified 4 places where if I look back on my sales career, I am not shy about all the things I got wrong. 4 places where I was probably creating buyer hesitation, which we often cause or call ghosting. I was creating those opportunities due to the way that I was messaging to my buyers. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce kind of a like what I used to do and what I do now, and my hope is we're going to get really, really tactical that y'all can kind of take these tactics, put them in your own voice, use and apply them so that you can reduce the number of times your prospect is kind of leaving you hanging or ghosted. So that is the plan. Let's party. First moment, and I'm going to kind of do these in order of the sales cycle. So I think everybody here has clearly signed up for a webinar because you are on one today. But let's imagine you sign up for a webinar from like a tech company. And when you sign up for that webinar, often you have to fill out literally everything except maybe your social security number, right? This is one I actually pulled from a webinar and it was like, you see, I don't know if you can see the last one. It's like, what is your monthly online advertising budget? I don't know what person would answer that honestly. That's just like, hey, target me because I got lots of money to spend. This part's out of our control, right? This is marketing. What is in our control, however, is what we do with the MQLs that we receive, marketing qualified leads. Often, and I know I did this a lot, I would get a bunch of leads that came in from people signing up for a webinar, went to a trade show or an event, downloaded a white paper, and I would immediately try to convert that into a meeting because that's our job, right? Meet with as many customers as possible, try to book as many meetings. And I would say something to the effect of this: saw you attended this webinar, saw you downloaded this guide, want to see our product, want to take a demo, want to spend a quick 15 minutes. This is a mall kiosk moment, right? Just because I expressed some interest in learning does not mean I've been dying here waiting for you to ask me for 20 minutes. So what do we do instead? One thing that I did way too late in my career, I wish I would have done earlier, is recognize that there's 2 types of prospects when we think about leads coming in from someone attending something. So something like this, like the webinar you're on right now, right here. I would be willing to assume most of you are not shopping for a sales training program. I would assume most of you are actually just here because you're like, I want to get some fresh ideas to learn how to think differently about my messaging. So, what I would describe that is what you see on the right. Learners are people that are consuming content that is educational in nature, just like we're doing here today. It does not mean by the fact that they showed up to it that they want to buy something. They may just be in the process of learning about the problem, learning about potential alternatives. Hand raisers are people who are shopping. So think about if someone signs up for a webinar and it's a demo day of your product. That might be a great example of someone who is signing up because they're evaluating different solutions, of which yours is one, and they're looking to learn more about your solutions. The key point here is that we have to recognize as salespeople, these 2 groups of people want very different things. So if I were to email out after this event an email and was like, hey, you want to hear about my sales training workshops? Might I get a few people? Sure. But what I'm ultimately probably going to do with that message is out of the 500 people that registered, I'm probably going to make 498 of them be like, I'm going to hesitate the next time I sign up for something like this. And this is something I think we can recognize in our own behavior. I'm sure everybody has signed up for a webinar, then gotten a barrage of emails following it. And you're like, it's the last time I try learning with that company. The reason this matters is because our ability to shape what someone learns about in our favor helps shape what they think they need. And so the very last thing we want to do is alienate a learner by breathing down their neck, asking them to take a meeting. Now, this might be small on the screen, so like just shout if it is. But what I did is on the right side, I wrote an example of a message. On the left side, I wrote out kind of the intention behind it. I don't think like anybody should be copy pasting anything, not because I care, but just because you all have your own unique voice. You all have your own unique flavor to things. There is no one size to do something right. I just like to give a tactical example to bring the concept to life. So if you look at this email, this would be a hypothetical scenario where let's say this was a webinar about discovery. What I would do is recognizing that it's a learner opportunity, I would then send a follow-up email that sounded like this. Subject line, super boring, discovery. Why do I say that? Well, they signed up for a webinar on discovery. Chances are it's probably an interesting topic. We don't have to be super clever. 1 to 2 word subject lines are our best friend. They perform the highest. Now, instead of starting the email with thank you for signing up or attending our webinar, I'm starting with here's something we didn't cover on today's discovery webinar. Now, there's a reason for that. Some of you, if you joined my last session with Women in Sales, we talked a lot about preview text. Preview text is the first line of text in your email. Most people, when they look at their inbox, have it set up so they can see the subject and then the preview text. So I, as a reader and being in my inbox and I'm scanning, if I see, thanks for attending our webinar, because of how common the motion is to follow up and ask for time, I'm just going to assume in many cases, this is someone who's now going to ask me for time. I know I can delete it. I don't know about y'all. I almost always delete those emails when I see thanks for joining our webinar. I'm like, oh, here we go. So what we want to do, I hate the term pattern interrupt, but you do really want to make it sound different. And in this case, I am trying to give someone something else, like a breadcrumb, on that same topic. I'm trying to create a little bit of curiosity here. So here's something we didn't cover on today's webinar. This is intended to try to get that open. So not just the subject line, but the preview text. Now, next section, this is really important here. Notice I'm not saying here's a 40-page ebook about discovery, because that is a big, big ask of our readers' time. What I'm trying to do is give them something consumable that they can bite off and just read quickly. So here's 5 discovery questions that Betty uses for this particular part of discovery, which is sizing the buyer's pain. So I'm giving something that's related but wasn't already covered. Now, line number 3 is written with intentional, unsure tonality. Notice I am not saying, because you attended this webinar, your team must be struggling to get great discovery done. That is really informative, it's assumptive, and it's really off-putting as a reader to feel like someone who doesn't know anything about you is just assuming that your team is completely incapable of doing their job. So not sure if is a really powerful phrase because it invites the human desire to correct. So I'm not sure if your team's deals are stalling at discovery. But if stuff like this helps, I can share more. That is really teeing it up. So I'm not pushing the reader to do something, which again, small kiosk moment. I'm inviting them into a conversation should they choose. And then lastly, I posted about this a couple weeks ago. I'm a huge fan of closing an email with either way, because I think what it does is it limits that like desperation, or as Josh Braun calls it, like commission breath, where I'm just trying to push for a meeting. Either way, thanks for joining. Lets that person know, like, I am not some desperate weirdo who's going to claw my way into their calendar by whatever means possible. So it's really powerful in a lot of occasions, but I think particularly here. Then the last piece is a PS. Now, a PS can be a number of different things. Like if I'm looking at a webinar, I think there are plenty of situations where if you're selling into enterprise or mid-market, you might see multiple people from the same company on a webinar. Oftentimes, they have no idea that other people are joining. And so one of the things I like to do with the PS is to say, like, looks like Tom and Debbie joined too. And the reason or the intentionality behind that is I want this person to know you're not the only person in the business that is trying to learn about this. So it might be because Tom, Debbie, and Katie all shared the webinar link together. It might also be that they are independently looking at this problem, and I'm sort of stitching together the story that there are multiple people in this business who care about this. The alternative is like if nobody else joined, I can say, did you already see our discovery coaching guide? Now that's a meteor asset. Rather than drop the link or drop the attachment, which may increase the likelihood that we get stuck in spam filters. I'm asking it as a question because if they've already seen it, great. Now I'm not sending them stuff they already known, but chances are they probably haven't. Again, this is a breadcrumb. What I want the person that's reading this to walk away with is to say, here is someone one who's not trying to close me right off the bat, but here's someone who actually has information that I can probably keep learning from. When we establish ourselves as sources of insight, what I think you'll find, at least in my experience for sure, is that people want to keep coming back to you because they perceive you to be helpful. And that is a great thing because the more we build trust in the beginning of the process, the more, again, we have the opportunity to shape demand in our favor. Masha, I see your note right there. Are you attaching the 5 questions? I would probably drop it below the PS. Now, here's the thing that I should add. Part of the problem with like spam filters, I'm not a deliverability expert, is like we first need to get a reply so that it shows we've talked from one domain to one other domain. If someone has signed up for a webinar, I think in most cases, they probably will have already responded. So I wouldn't lose like your lunch over do you attach something, do you not? Just recognize it's one additional risk for getting your email opened is if you have links, attachments, images, things like that. Okay, so point of this section is don't treat every single MQL the same. Look at what is the job to be done of the content, the event, the webinar that they're joining, and think about, is this person likely trying to learn or are they trying to solution shop, and treat your responses as such. Okay, number 2, buyers hesitate to meet with us. Now, this we talked a lot about in the last session, so I won't go in depth here, but if you did not see the Overcoming the Buyer's Mental Spam Filter webinar that we did a few months back, ping us in the chat. We'll get you the link to access it. This goes over like all the in-depth stuff for cold email. But here's what I find fascinating. I am not someone who will ever stand on any stage or any webinar and say anything is dead. I don't prefer to cold call, but it would be absolutely ignorant of me to sit here and tell everybody that cold calling doesn't work because I don't agree with it. And not even that I don't agree with it, but because I don't do it. And so I think what's really important to understand is every channel is alive and well. They're all good. Maybe not the fax machine, but I'm sure someone here could even tell me like, I send faxes and they work. All channels are alive and well. But when you look at some of the research, so this is a study LinkedIn did in February of this year, overwhelmingly, the buyers that participated said their preferred first outreach method is email. Now, this does not mean to stop cold calling or stop social sell or any of that. I do not want any confusion in here. Your best sellers are always going to use all the channels available to them. However, I think when I look at this data, this does kind of make logical sense because, again, go back to the mall kiosk moment. The reason we don't love that moment is because we want to be in control of what we learn and how we learn. It's the same reason if I was going to buy a car, I would never just show up at a car dealership and be like, I haven't done any research. Tell me what you got. We like to feel in control. What email offers is the opportunity for someone to look at something, sit back and say yes or no, or maybe, or whatever the case may be, versus in a conversation, there's inherent pressure. Now, again, doesn't mean you shouldn't cold call. I'm just saying when I look at this data, it kind of makes logical sense because I think it gives the reader the ability to be in the driver's seat. Now, the problem with this is, and I talk a lot about this, is when you look at how most of us grew up learning how to write in school, most of us grew up learning to use really big words and complex sentences and double space the hell out of this and move our margins out to hit a minimum. And then we come into sales and no one ever unteaches us that stuff. Now, I will also add, when I was an early seller, I also had the added pressure of being like, I'm 23 years old. I'm selling into Fortune 500 CMOs. I've never been a CMO. I need to make this person believe that I am smart. So the way that I do that is I use all of my big words and I try to make this email sound like really academic. But all that does for the reader on the other side is show effort. Like if I sent this email and you can't read it, but if I sent this email to you, you don't even need to see the words to know like this is going to take way too much time to read. If I don't know this person, the chances that I read this are slim to none unless I got a really slow day and I'm feeling generous. So this idea that like our job is to make someone think that we're smart or to, sell our solution and convince them that we have like the number one award-winning leading solution of whatever is how most of us were taught to do cold email. Cold email is a terrible channel for selling. It is a great channel for starting a conversation. And so when I go back and I look at a lot of my emails, I think the easy reason for why I got ghosted so much is because I came in hot in someone's email inbox and I'm just selling to them, knowing very little about them and actually talking very little about them in the email, just talking about me and how great our stuff is. And so what I really believe, and this is why I do like to start with email when I'm writing a message, is this quote on the left. I will share the shit out of this. I share it in every possible angle I can. I really believe in this, which is writing is how we figure out that we don't know what we're talking about. I have written so many emails where by the end of the email, I'm like, I have actually no idea why I'm reaching out to this person, other than the fact that I think I could sell a big deal there because of the number of salespeople they have. It's a terrible reason to send a cold email. But writing is how we figure it out. Because when we see a piece of written content, we are confronted by whether or not that message makes sense. So Michael Scott's quote on here, I freaking love this quote. I love The Office. Like I would say that was probably me in a lot of cases. I'm just starting writing and then I hope it eventually goes somewhere. Writing is a great habit because even if you start with cold email, you can then repurpose that message in a cold call, in a social selling, in any channel that you see fit. So the point here is less about which channel you start with and rather starting with a message that shows I have a reason for why you and why now. So I put up two examples here. In my opinion, this is my opinion, I think the mistake I made a lot, and this mistake I see on a lot of emails that causes people to ghost or not respond, is we are trying to sell a solution. So our cold emails are trying to convince someone, we've got this really cool thing and I want to show you it. As we talked about before in the mall kiosk moment, that is exactly why we run in the other direction, is because we do not want to be sold, let alone in our email. So in my opinion, I think one of the best characteristics of a great cold email that helps you get ghosted less is showing that you see, hear, and understand this person before you've ever spoken to them. So on the left, this is an email, and one of my clients, we did an email workshop, and he said, I'm going to pick you as my target. Now, I post on LinkedIn all the time. Not everybody who was on this call has buyers that post on LinkedIn. So I am not saying like you should all make LinkedIn strategy your strategy. But if you do have a buyer that has posted on LinkedIn and talked about their business, or you've watched a podcast, or you've Googled the company CEO and founder name plus interview, and you found an interview, lead with an observation that is relevant to your message. So in this case, it's, hey, Jen, saw on LinkedIn you're speaking at 17 sales kickoffs this year. Without reading anything else, I know that this person has at least taken a few minutes to express interest in my business. That is a great way to start a conversation. Second line, your voice is in for a ride. It's cute. Is it necessary? No, but I don't hate it because it's like, yeah, okay, you're thinking. If you're doing 17 sales kickoffs, that must be really hard on your voice. That is showing me this person sees and understands what I do. Next thing, notice the unsure tonality here. Curious if it's a challenge to keep the calendar book once SKO season has cooled down. Now, that is one question, one sentence, but it's really powerful because what it shows without a big, long narration of it is this person has thought about my business and identified a potential problem, which is January through March is really busy for SKO speakers, sales kickoff speakers. After March, things tend to slow down. And so without being like, I read a bunch of things and I did this and I did this, they're just asking the question. I love that. And then here's the interesting use of social proof. Instead of saying, we worked with so-and-so and helped them grow bookings by 400%, which immediately goes into mall kiosk mode, what they did instead is show me that they have insight into how other people I'd probably look up to have addressed this challenge. So what they're selling here is not the solution. They're selling insight. They're selling, here's how I can tell you how other people who are farther ahead of you on this journey have done that. That's interesting. That's really interesting because I might not know Josh and John. And I might not have the opportunity to ask them. So chances are in your territory, you have clients, customers you've worked with that other people are probably really interested to understand how do they make those trade-offs. So any interest in exploring some of the ways John and Josh overcome seasonality challenges? Hell yeah, I've got interest in that. And then notice again, soft close. Either way, keep some lozenges on hand. Look forward to your thoughts. Will. No best, no regards, no here's my calendar, none of that. This feels almost like a text, which I love because the best conversations, the ones we want to have, are not the mall kiosk ones. We typically, as humans, want to engage in two-way conversations where someone's not talking at us, trying to sell us something, but it's an exchange of an idea. So, what I always say is our emails are a movie trailer to what our first calls with that client are going to sound like. If our emails sound like we are selling, they will probably anticipate the first call will be selling. And that is often, I think, why a lot of people probably just ghosted me on cold emails early career when I was writing those. Now, on the right side, one of the things, when I share this sort of like lead with an observation, sometimes people will say, yeah, but like I saw that or noticed that openers are becoming commoditized too. I kind of I don't know that I agree with that because I think really specific, solid observations still get read. It's like the noticed you're a VP of sales, noticed you're like something totally obvious that could be mail merged to everybody. Like I think that's the stuff that we can't get away with. But here's just an alternative. Shopped at your Bucktown location last week. Associate gave me a perfect recommendation for your sister's birthday present. Ever wish you could replicate that experience on your website? Bob at Bob's Flowers figured out how to do it without adding headcount. Open to hearing how. Again, so few words, but this is saying a lot. One, this is not saying you suck at website personalized requests. And we might sit here and be like, I would never say that. We say that shit all the time in cold emails. Looks like you're struggling to do the job you were hired to do from a complete stranger. This is acknowledging most people want to do great work, but things prevent them from doing that. So what I can tell with this message is this person has a hypothesis that having a personalized recommendation for a shopper is important because they do it in their stores. But it's trickier to do that on a website because you don't have a live human being. So the problem is probably, I don't know how to do this without adding headcount that I can't afford. So this is preempting an objection. And again, using social proof to show I've got insight into how someone else has done this. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So this is, again, I just want to show two different examples. Even if someone's not on LinkedIn, it's thinking critically about their business before we show up and throw up all about ours, which, we love to do. So this is a little bit of a take-home test. Again, this was covered in much more detail in the first session, but here's some of the things to watch out for that might make your email read as a sales email. And that's kind of what we're trying to protect against. So things like, am I using freaking emojis in my subject line? I don't know a single executive that's like, I've used this example a bunch, but like if they're emailing you to be like, update your CRM, update your forecast in CRM, they are never writing a subject line that sounds like 10 times your forecast accuracy with salesforce.com, rocket ship emoji, exclamation point. Like that just sounds like a sales email. They would write an email that's like, update your CRM, update your forecast. And that's how we want to show up. We intentionally want to be a bit boring because boring emails, subject lines, are the ones that get read. Second thing is preview text. We saw two examples here, but we really want to be intentional. I know most of us know don't start with I hope you're well, but I still see a ton of my name is, I work for this company, noticed you're a VP of sales. That's just red flashing signs that this is a sales email. So if you pay attention to anything, even more so than your subject, I'd argue, it's that first line of text because that is the movie trailer to what the email is about. Reading grade level, I'll call out. If you are using all of your fanciest words, it's just making it harder for that buyer to understand what the hell we're talking about. So big words, like count the syllables, as silly as that sounds. An example is visibility. Like we give you visibility is a big ass word. Say, we help you see, because we want to be as easy as possible to read this thing. And then when we think about calls to action, we don't always have to throw our meeting link in there or ask for a quick 20 minutes. If you are going to ask for time, one big recommendation is please never use the word quick in front of it. It actually makes us sound really naive. It's not about what is the thing people talk about? It's not about elevating your presence, but it is about when we say quick, it is an interruption to their day. 15 minutes in a busy executive's day is an interruption. And when we say it's just a quick call, it makes us sound like we don't understand their world. So kill quick if you are going to use time, but we don't always have to ask for time in the first email. The idea is to get a response and to start a conversation, which should ultimately lead to a meeting. So just a little take-home test you can use. All right, moment number 3. We got 2 more, 3 and 4. Buyers hesitate to champion us. Now, some of you may have seen this before. This is research that came out from Challenger. Thank God they stopped studying it in 2020 because who knows where these numbers would be now. But the way to look at this is what happens to purchase likelihood as more people on the customer side get involved. So the way to read this is if you're selling to one person, they consult no one. Like it's a mom and a pop, and pop doesn't even know I'm buying it. I'm mom. I have an 81% likelihood of closing it if they see value. The second I add just one additional person, the second I bring pop into it, purchase likelihood falls off a cliff to 55%. This makes logical sense if you think about the last time you tried to get a group of people together to go to dinner. It's like, it's so bad now, mostly because I live in the suburb. Like half my friends live in the suburb, half of them live in the city. And so it's like, it's just a failed launch to try to get any dinner reservations booked because it's too many people with different opinions about everything. And so if you look at what happens at 6, purchase likelihood is dropping off to 31%. That is abysmal. Up top, you see this was what they studied in 2015. The average number of people involved on the customer side was 5.4. In 5 years, that number more than doubled. And that is 4 years ago. This number, I don't think is going to get better, right? Because this is a byproduct of risk aversion. I want to make sure if I'm going to buy something, no one's going to throw their hand up after the contract is signed and be like, I don't know, why do we do this? Or we should have done it this way. So I'm going to involve everybody and their mother in this thing. So the job of a champion, I don't think I appreciated this when I was first started selling. It is so hard. This person is volunteering to now go around and try to get everybody to agree on like literally anything, build a business case, do all of this work. And so one of the really common points in the sales cycle where we get ghosted is we like have a great conversation with our champion. They're like, this is awesome. And we follow up and we're like, great. Let me give you all the solution collateral. And then you go socialize this around because you said you got it. So like, let's go do this. So I used to write emails like this on the left. Thanks for meeting with me today. I'm encouraged by the alignment between our two organizations. Below and attached, I've included some information around how we can help reduce forecast inaccuracy. Let's plan to connect once you've socialized this with the team. How's Friday at 2? Always going for that next step. Now, this is great for me as a salesperson. Massively low effort. I'm just like, here's the stuff marketing gave me. I'm going to attach it to this email. Maybe I do a slide about you, but for the most part, it's just like, let me just get this out. Let me ship this. Really low effort for the seller. But now the champion, when they hang up that call, they're like, hold on a second. You get paid commission for this. I have to spend money. And now I'm the one who's got to do all the work. So I open up your attachments and I look and I'm like, I can never share this with my CEO because it's written like a sales pitch. So now I have to go back. I have to do all this work, write this in my language, and then try to socialize it. That is effort out the butt. Most people are not going to voluntarily choose effort. One of the best things I ever did, I highly recommend this to others, is I asked a company who bought where I wasn't directly involved in the conversation. I said, can you show me your slides you built to pitch this internally? And I looked at that and I was like, dang, there is not a single slide in this deck that came from me, nor is there a single slide in this deck that I probably would have thought to send. And so it's a really good way if you are like earlier on or you're unsure of how people go back to a customer who bought from you and be like, do you happen to have what you use to pitch this internally? And you'll see it's much more problem focused than solution focused. So what I do now is a message that looks like on the right. I don't want, in most cases, my champion to shop a solution around to a bunch of people who were not part of the conversation we already had. Because maybe this person and I had like great discovery and we uncovered this cost of inaction and they're fired up, but everybody else wasn't in that conversation. And so when they pitch a solution internally, it's just dollar signs. And if somebody else in that buying group is trying to get their thing funded, they will put up a wall. And so what I realized is I needed to slow down get problem alignment with the buying group first, and then, and only then, start talking about solution. So here's what my note sounds like instead. I ghostwrite this for my buyer. Again, recognizing this is a moment of high effort. I want to reduce effort. They can tweak it, duh, it's their email, but I'm writing it so I'm not landing that in their plate. I asked Sally to spend 30 minutes with us next week. I met with her regarding our enterprise new logo target and the roadblocks we hit with 14 of our enterprise deals pushing into Q2. That's our problem. She had a unique point of view on root causes we haven't discussed. That is creating curiosity, outside in thinking. She's been working with enterprise sales leaders at Acme and Zeta on this too. That is social proof. Sally ain't some random I found hanging out in the alley. Any concerns with us spending 30 minutes together? Now, my buyer might add some stuff to it, but the whole point of this is we often get ghosted at this point, going from champion to buying group, because we put way too much work in the hands of our champion. Think about what can I do to relieve some of that effort, because they are putting a target on their back by asking for money, asking for people's time. And we really want to make that much more problem focused versus just showing up and demoing our solution right off the bat to people who might not even agree with the state of the problem. So that is number 3. And number 4, let's face it, if you're on this call, you're in sales, you have done this. We've all done this. It's our dirty little secret. We're late stage and we're getting ghosted. And now we're getting desperate. And so what do? We love that, like, just checking in. And I think a lot about this. I think the reason we love this so much is we're trying not to be a bother. We're intentionally trying to be like, I'm just checking in. When in reality, it's reading to the buyer like, oh, here we go. Salesperson that just wants to close the deal. So it's never sent with bad intentions, but what it portrays in the language is that we often just think like it's kind of easy to buy, right? Buying sucks. Buying is so hard. I've been on buying committees a few times and it is arguably one of like the worst time sinks ever. And so by just constantly being like, what's up with the contract sector? What's up with the contract sector? We actually, again, sound a bit naive. We also make it uncomfortable for someone to tell us bad news. This is something else I wish I had realized earlier in my sales career is I don't care. I do care. It matters less if it's good or bad news. It just matters that I have news. Because I think the worst position we can be in is when we go to our manager in a forecast meeting and we're like, I don't know, I haven't heard from them in like a week. Then it just looks like we're not doing our job. So I need to make it safe to hear bad news because bad news is information. Information helps me act. So these are 2 different ways I will approach this. So the first one is maybe if I'm getting like a feeling that my thing might be deprioritized. So some cues to that might be like, hey, earlier in the sales process, they mentioned in addition to sales training, they were looking at some, call recording technology. And I know that's a threat that might still be there. Or they mentioned somebody else in the buying committee was really gung ho about buying some sales tech instead of doing training. Here's where I'm going to hopefully subtly reinstate why we're talking about this solution to begin with. So, first thing I'm doing is I'm acknowledging this is a hard job I've asked you to do, and I understand that. So, you've been a hero working through this process. I get that it's grueling. I want to soften the beginning before I ask them for something so it doesn't just come across as like, give me the thing that I want. Then I'm going back to like, I was reflecting on the story you shared about the 5 million in Q4 pipeline that we lost to status quo. If the team could have converted 25% of that, the business would have crossed its Q4 target. This is like back to why the person began with us. Now, I do not think this is useful if someone is in the like late stages of contracting. You don't need to remind them of why they're buying to begin with. This is more so for a scenario where like, I'm worried there might be some sort of threat here. And then notice how I'm wording that last question. Have you hit an unexpected roadblock that will affect our plan to reduce that number for Q2? I am making this about the impact to their business, not about my need to hit my goal. And by saying, have you hit an unexpected roadblock? I'm making something else the enemy. I am making, hey, none of us could have seen this coming. Our CFO just like, told us to freeze spending. I want to make it safe for that person to say, yes, I have. And it's not because I don't know how to buy. It's not because I couldn't follow through on my promise. It's because shit happens when we buy things. And so unexpected roadblock is really intentional because I want to make it safe for them to be like, Yes, that's what it was. It was an unexpected roadblock. Could have never seen it coming. So that's on the left. On the right is more common. This is where you are isolating what is the thing that we are waiting for late stage. So if you've got a complex, contract, it might have to go through legal and procurement and compliance to get redlined or edited. If you just title the email the thing that you think is stalling it, red lines, and then say, not sure if legal had a chance to review our red line responses. Are we still in a position to kick off the project tomorrow? Either way, appreciate all you're doing to get this done. We are subtly, in very few words, just identifying and labeling the thing that we think we're waiting on. We are subtly reminding them that, like, we had this idea of kicking off the project tomorrow that is dependent on this thing getting done. But at the same time, again, notice that either way, I freaking love either way. Either way, appreciate all you're doing to get this done. We have to control ourselves from getting into transactional, like, I'm almost there. Let me just close the deal. So that's number 4. So those are the 4 I brought. Now we've got about 19 minutes left. There were 2 questions that were submitted in the Women in Sales Slack. I do want to say, if you are not in the Women in Sales Slack, what are you doing? What are you doing? We get great questions in there and lots of really smart people in there interacting, providing their perspectives. So this is one of the questions that we got. So I'm getting a lot of send me an email objections. I'd love to hear how to convert that into a meeting. Now, there are plenty of like objection handling tactics for this. I saw some yesterday actually when I was scrolling through the feed, which is like, yeah, I can send you an email, but like, tell me what you'd want to see. I personally don't love those because it's like, I called you. Now you tell me what to write in the email so that I can book a meeting with you. It's a little mall kiosky. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm sure it works for a lot of people. I just personally don't prefer it. When I hear this, I think we have a choice to make, which is we can either prioritize our booking a meeting over something someone has told us, or we can prioritize and respect that someone might be not in the right headspace to hear it. They might be busy with something else. And by steamrolling them and treating it as an objection, I'm actually just being inconsiderate to what they want. Now, there is no silver bullet here, but if this were me in this situation, I would say, I hear you loud and clear. I'm going to send you an email. It's going to come from Jen@demandgen.com. Just if you don't mind, if you're totally uninterested, just let me know. I don't want to bother you. And then I would let them off the hook. And the reason I believe in this is because if I go back to that preference study we saw from LinkedIn, I actually feel like I'm this way. I don't want to be hard sold in a moment where I'm not expecting it. I actually want to be able to take the time to say, let me look at this and decide, is this something I want to do? I think often the reason we are afraid to send an email is because we're not confident in what we would say in that email. So I would say our time is better spent looking at their business, leading with that observation, that problem hypothesis, keeping it short and punchy, and then just opening the door for bad news. If I'm totally off the mark, just let me know. That's cool. So I think objections are more things like we don't have budget, we don't have time. Like those to me are objections. Send me an email feels less to me like an objection and more like I have a communication preference and I'm just asking you to honor it. So this is a place where I'd A/B test like a bunch of different approaches. I'm just sharing what I would personally do here. I have been on the other end of a cold call where someone tried to overcome the objection of send me an email and it just felt massively icky. I was like, you are prioritizing what you want over what I want. And one of 2 things happen. Either one, I'm like, okay, forget you. Or 2, I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's book that meeting. And then I cancel it once they're off the phone. So if you see like a high drop off rate from cold call booked meetings because we're doing this, that might be a cue to step back and say, maybe I'm trying to prioritize what's in it for me over what's in it for them. Next community submitted question. Would love to hear the best structure for Just Connect call conversions. And I said, what is Just Connect call conversions? And they said, this is the first email we send with the goal of getting a connect book to see if the prospect is qualified and or lets the prospect get a better idea of us. Now, this was 100% my approach when I was like early in selling, because I'm trying to make it sound like, oh, this is like super casual. We're just connecting, just connecting. We're not connecting. And they know it. They know, like when buyers hear things like just connect, quick question, it is something they have heard so many times before. And they know it is us trying to just casually sneak our way into there. And so my opinion on this is if we are offering like a just connect, I just want to connect, that is in many cases lower value for the buyer. And so I always want to give the buyer a reason as to why them, why now. It should never be just because I just wanna connect and see what's going on. So, I would probably go back to the examples I shared of cold emails and identify, like, what is that thing that makes me feel like it's worth 15 minutes of their spare time to actually connect on something like this. So that's probably how I'd handle that. So, I'm gonna turn the slides off, and now we're gonna open up for some questions because we got 15 minutes left, and let's have some fun with it. So okay. Thank you, Alexine. What's your thoughts on mentioning competitors? We work with company X, a competitor of yours, and they had this problem. Curious if you at company Y also have this issue we can help solve. I love this question. I am more inclined to use a social proof example that is a similar need state versus a competitor. And I'll explain why, and then I'll explain what I mean. Reason being, I think if someone were to reach out to me and be like, I'm working with, I don't know, someone who's a competitor of me, and here's something that was problematic for them. My first thought is if I start working with this company, are they going to email my competitors and tell them things that I'm struggling with? So I think I'm not saying it can never work. I'm just saying it might erode a little bit of trust in the beginning, which is the most important place to build trust. So what I would do is look for places where you can find commonalities but it's not a direct competitor. So if I'm selling to a company that operates with a franchise model, I don't have to pick their direct competitor. I might just be able to say, was working with, such and such who has 500 franchise locations, and that's scratching the itch because what I'm trying to do is convey I've helped someone with a similar need state, need problem to you. And I think wherever possible, I like to pick non-competitors just so I'm not coming across as someone who would like violate that trust if we started working together. So that's my take on that. How do you move smarter and faster with personalized cold email if you have hundreds, not thousands of prospects? So I love these questions. So I think largely one of the things that has gotten us into a lot of trouble in sales in the last decade is just our desire to do more. Like do it faster, do it more efficiently. And I get it, right? Because our thinking is like we've got big targets to hit. It's harder, it's noisy. So like how can I do more? I personally like to stay away from that. I really believe that the process of looking at one company and identifying a potential problem hypothesis and writing a great email, getting a reply, that's when I should start looking to scale. What I often see is we try to find like, what's the thing I can send to lots of people? And then like hope that the numbers work in my favor. That's not how scale is ever supposed to work. It's find something that works and then scale that. So I was working with someone last week in a workshop, and they were selling to like state penitentiary. I don't even know how to say that. Prisons. Why did I choose a big word? This is why I type and write in fifth grade language. They were selling to prisons. And one of the things they realized is they were like, when I look at one company, I can really deeply understand what they might be up against. Then when I'm done writing that email, I can say, who else is up against that challenge? And then what they were able to do is say, I just need to change this one piece. So they did like the rate of inmates who did not end up coming back to prison. So that was something personalized they could find about every account. So they could still scratch the itch of, hey, I saw this about you, but it didn't have to be a unique email message the entire time. So my advice, very long-winded, is start with one company, write a great email, get a reply, and then say, now who else would have a similar problem? Not just their competitors, but like what other need states might have that same problem. And that's how I would probably go after it. Okay. Is there an AI tool that helps capture personal data that allows for faster outreach, but also ties to activity tracking in Salesforce? So the one that I'm most aware of is Copy AI. So Copy.ai, if anyone knows Kyle Coleman, he's there. I've got no affiliation with them, but I have done a webinar with them where he kind of like, I'm not big into AI. Like I'm big into the process of like listen and look at a company. But I did a webinar with him where he showed how Copy AI did it. And they have an ability where you put the company's ticker signal in there, and then it shows you like kind of a summarized version. So if you are looking for AI, I've heard nothing but good stuff about them. I am more so a fan of going back and like Googling the company CEO, looking for an interview. Cause I always think, not always, a lot of times the problem with a lot of AI tools is they're making really generic observations. So, saw you liked this post, saw you commented on something, saw you are a VP of sales, saw you like dogs. And then we do this like completely awkward context switch into anyway, what we sell is this. So I think the more important thing is this email about them versus me? If you can find an AI tool that gets you great information, awesome. But there is nothing wrong with kind of doing it the old fashioned way. How do you handle objections via budget? So this is a meaty question. I would never do it over email, ever, ever, ever. It's a place where email absolutely sucks. I think budget objections typically come when we have jumped too quickly into selling our solution. So if I look back at how I used to sell, my goal was to like by end of call one, be able to give a quote on pricing and hope that they would then shop that around. The problem with doing that is like 30 minutes is not a ton of time to really get someone to size their problem big enough that it would justify a really big expense to pay for it. So when I get a budget objection early, it is often a byproduct of me rushing the sales process, less so than true budget. Because what I will say, and I know this is said a lot, but I've seen this so much in my career, is budget magically appears sometimes when you've got a problem that's big enough. So if you think about COVID, remember like nobody had budget for sales tech and sales tools until their businesses pivoted and they needed it. So I would say budget, like if you're getting lots of budget objections, I might look at how quickly am I introducing solution versus am I truly building up a large enough cost of inaction such that they expect a higher price point for budget. That being said, part of sales is like you're just going to hear budget objections from time to time, and sometimes it's the reality, and like we just got to take it. What have you seen work for getting marketing on board with these type of messaging changes? Oh, I love this question. I love coming after marketing. I prefer, this is not what I would always done. I prefer proving concept in my own territory first. So if we think back to like where marketing typically gets involved, maybe it's nurture campaigns for people who sign up for webinars. What I did when I was an AE is I shifted kind of the learner hand raiser approach I talked about. I started writing learner follow-ups. And then I went to my marketing team and said, I've been experimenting with this and I've gotten X many replies as a result of doing it this way. Would this be something we'd be willing to A/B test for our next webinar? I would not try to go in and like guns blazing, steamroll them. I think marketers are used to A/B testing a lot. Make it safe for them to experiment. We've got a webinar on the 23rd. Could we try this type of copy for just this message and measure the reply rate between how we usually do it and here and give them evidence? Because I think that's the thing that marketing like will always want is if we change what we do, we need evidence that it works. So I would say pilot it in your own kind of mini territory and then take those results and ask for a small bite-sized A/B test with them. Do you ever dig into companies' 10Ks, 10Qs for cold email research? I've read that it can be helpful if it seems intimidating. I totally get that it seems intimidating. Sometimes I remember when I first started reading them, I'm like, I don't even know what these friggin' words mean. What I absolutely love, so I've mentioned before, I love doing the CEO's name or the founder's name plus interview because typically things they are talking about publicly are things that are really important to them and they use human language because they're in an interview versus like 10Ks and things like that can be really corporate language. But I'm a huge fan of looking at the CEO letter to shareholders because the CEO letter to shareholders is basically here's what we're promising or committing to you this year. So I don't need to be like, what are your company's priorities? For most companies, it's spelled out. And then like quarterly reports, investor presentations, those are almost like report cards. So you said you were going to do this in the beginning of the year, like grow our enterprise segment by 50%. I get an update in your quarterly report. That helps me understand, is there a large gap between what you said you were going to do and how you're performing against it? So I like to use those two in parallel. Okay. Thoughts on asking too many questions, but oh, Margot, great question. One question, great. Someone keeps asking questions back and forth, pick up the damn phone. It's not guaranteed that they're going to ask or answer, but even if they don't answer, that's where I'm not a huge, like, video person, but I do think this is a great place for video because it's the delivery of it, where you might send a video or a voice note and just be like, "Hey, it seems like, I take ownership. I've left a bunch of things unanswered that seem pretty important to making this decision. It might just be ideal if we can carve out 10 minutes and I can save you the back and forth." I would throw that out there. If you get a no, I want to keep email, respect the communication preference. Like, I've had people that have pushed me on this. I'm not some bigwig buyer, but like, usually if I'm like, no, it's because I'm in a busy thing or I'm trying to get information quickly and I just don't have time to make a call. But I would always try to do that first, so that you can really also then get into like, what is driving you to ask these questions? Is this coming from someone else in the buying group? Is this like you're getting indecisive? Like, where is a lot of this coming from? And I think sometimes just the human delivery and tonality of a conversation plays better than over email. Those are such good questions. Do we have any more, Axine? Are we tapped out? Oh, here, I'll pick this one. Karina, thoughts on sending a calendar invite to someone who said they were interested in meeting with us, but then disappeared. I have no issues with that whatsoever. I have issues with sending a calendar invite when someone never agreed to speak, but I think sometimes it's just genuinely shit gets lost in the wash. And so if someone has given you an expressed consent that I want to meet with you, I would send a calendar invite. I would just note in the body of the calendar, you know, you mentioned you wanted to get together to talk about this. Not sure if this date would work or if there's a better one instead. Done. And leave it up to them to move it. I would never do it if someone did not consent. Okay. 3 minutes left. I'm gonna take one more question and then we'll wrap up. Have you ever sold outside of LinkedIn, like Facebook, Instagram, or X? I love this question because I know we all get thrown in the face about how much we should be on LinkedIn, and I personally believe, like, the habit of writing on LinkedIn is a good thing, so I'm pro it. However, one of the companies I used to work with was a company that sold, like, garage door openers and, cameras, like, when you have in your garage when someone opens your door, and their buyers aren't hanging out on LinkedIn, but almost every homeowners association, so this was the B2B side where they're selling to like apartment complexes. Almost every homeowners association has a Facebook group for their condo owners. And so they were really smart where they said, we're going to go out and create stuff that's helpful to condo owners. So things like safety guides. It's not selling our garage door opener, but access to a garage is a safety issue. So it's leading them to a solution, but they spent a lot of time on Facebook to go out and figure out like, one, what were these people learning and asking about? And two, what can we give them that could be helpful? And what could we envision them sharing with their condo owners in a meeting that would get our name out? So absolutely, it's more important to understand where your customer goes to learn than following the trends because everybody says go sell on LinkedIn. Great question. Great questions. I'm gonna close with this. Um, I am finally getting around to starting an email newsletter. This is the first time I'm actually even sharing it. I know some people don't want any more email. That's totally cool. But if you want to stay up to date with more things like this that I'm doing, sessions like this, tactical tips, please. I don't know why I got rid of that. Oh, here it is. Um, Join if you wanna join that, just go to demandgen.com. It's Jen with a J, bump, and you will be added to that when that starts to come out. So there it is, demandgen.com. With my last 30 seconds, thank you, thank you, thank you. My favorite thing about working with sales is how much y'all continually seek out to get better. So thank you for spending the time today. This was a pure joy, and I hope to see a lot of you again soon.